Hello and welcome to Africa Here and Now, the conversation you've always wanted to have about the continent. I'm Martine Dennis. Today, Malawi's Vice President spells out what Africa wants from the climate conference in Baku.
We are here not to clap hands for pledges. We have done that before. We are here to get what was pledged, to get what was promised.
We're on the ground in northern Kenya to find out how climate change is making people poorer. Plus, Africa's last colony. Is it the end of the road for Western Sahara's bid for independence? Okay, well, as ever, I'm really happy to introduce you to Patrick Smith, editor of Africa Confidential. He's joining us. And DONU Kogbara, who is a writer and commentator, normally out of Abuja, the Nigerian capital, but this time joining us from London. Welcome, DONU. And let's have a little bit more of a listen, shall we, to the Malawian vice president, who's in that big climate conference taking place in the Azerbaijani capital, Baku. And he basically nails it, I think, and says it like it is as to what Africa wants to get from this conference. Let's have a listen.
You see, we have attended a number of COP conferences. In Dubai, there were pledges that were made, which have not been met. We are here in Azerbaijan, Baku, and surely there will be pledges. So from the least developed countries, what we are saying is we are not happy to still remain in the least developed country group. For Malawi, we are doing all what we can to lift ourselves out of this group. Now, for that to happen, we need to work in close collaboration with other least developed countries and also the developed countries.
But it's all well and good, isn't it, hearing about international financial mechanisms and all these high-level meetings taking place in Baku. But I thought it was probably best that we remind ourselves of what it's actually like to try to live and make a living in an area that is being ravaged by climate change. So I was lucky enough earlier to be joined by Charles EKALELE, who himself is a pastoralist in Turkana County, that's in northern Kenya, but he's also a humanitarian worker, so he's got a real in as to the lives of his community. What is life actually like on the ground when you're trying to make a living amidst climate change?
Yes, thanks, Martin. Turkana is one of the counties in Kenya which is hardly hit by climate change, and it is in northern Kenya. And in Kenya, the northern part is classified as arsal and semi-arid areas, which means they experience drought most of the time. And when the rainfall comes, it becomes an extreme rainfall that causes floods and destruction. And here in Turkana, life has changed. When I grew up, I found a place or a region which had a lot of pasture. People had a lot of livestock. Some households were doing rain-fed agriculture. But since recently, things have changed in terms of how communities are trying to adapt because their livelihood has been affected, because majorly people here are livestock keepers, and 80% of their livelihoods rotates around livestock. And this has been very disastrous because of the drought, the frequent patterns of drought that come in, and how people keep on losing their livestock. Even those who are doing agriculture, rain-fed agriculture, can no longer do that. And if they do, the crops dry before harvest. So that is how life is in this place.
And you yourself, Charles, you have livestock, don't you? What happens then when there is no pasture for your livestock? What do pastoralists then have to do with their herds?
Yeah, I'm a pastoralist and I own some livestock. Although I have tried to reduce the number of livestock I own because of the need to provide for feeds and pasture. What happens here is that when there is no pasture because of intermittent rainfall, pastoralists tend to move to the outside areas, that is at the borders of Uganda, South Sudan, and Ethiopia, just to look for greener pastures, because those areas experience rainfall most of the times in the year. Probably they are not much affected like Turkana, Now, when they move there, they find other communities concentrated at the borders, and this, of course, cause congestion or overutilization of the resources around those border areas, and probably cause even conflict, because people will not want to allow other people to come and deplete the existing pasture they have.
So overall, would you say then that the communities in Turkana County, which is the county in northern Kenya that we're talking about, overall, would you say that people are suffering a lot as a consequence in the change in the patterns of rainfall and indeed increased temperatures during the hot season?
Yes, I can say many people here are affected by drought, and we know drought is one of the hazards of climate change. And we see, if you see the reports or the assessment, the climate adaptation assessments done in Turkana, it indicated that by 2022, 728,000 people were affected by drought. And of course, if you compare that number to the total population of Turkana, which is around 1 million, you see a bigger number of people has been affected. And this means that they have lost livestock, they have food insecurity, and they are looking for humanitarian support or trying to see whether they can diversify and do other livelihoods.
So when they lose their livestock, these communities, families actually lose their livelihoods, don't they?
They do lose their livelihoods, and that's why when we have rain here, we have livestock are doing well, they are reproducing, and we have enough milk for the households. We have enough meat. People can sell that. They can sell their livestock to get money to buy other commodities. So when the livestock is affected, it means an household is being affected.
And when a household is affected, the implications, therefore, are children perhaps not going to school.
Yes, we understand that out of the 720,000 affected people in Turkana, 50,000 were cases of under 5 acute malnutrition. And it shows that if such number of children are not accessing food nutrients, then the families are distressed. Mothers are not are pessimistic of the future, and it means that even some children get out of school because the little food which is there is not probably available enough for all children. And when they move, we're looking for pasture, they move with their children. And that means now even children accessing school and health services is interrupted.
How conscious, how aware are people of this phenomenon that we refer to as climate change? Are they aware that they are part of a global phenomenon that's affecting communities all over the world?
Yeah, thanks. One thing I found out, because I'm a climate champion, that means I champion for locally led solutions. And when I've moved around, I have found out that communities here have realized that things have changed, but they don't relate this to the how, they don't relate to what we know, that these are caused by human actions and all that. So we see communities who are experiencing the effect of climate change, but really do not understand how this thing is coming up with.
And so, are they therefore aware of what's going on in Azerbaijan, in Baku?
I doubt nearly all of them, apart from the literate people in the urban centers, understand what is happening. They understand even there is a conference at Baku. So I see communities that need sensitization, and communities that need to know what actually is happening globally. And the global actions are also affecting them at this place.
And if you were able to get a message to the leaders and the experts who are meeting in Azerbaijan, what would be your message, Charles?
Yeah, my message is that let conversations be conversations that are really going to bring impact to those people who are affected, like people living in Turkana County, because we don't want to see conversations which do not bring results. We want conversations that can actually be followed by actions, so that we save the planet, we save people who are suffering because of the actions of other people.
And how far do you think that your government, the government in Nairobi or the local government in northern Turkana County, how far do you think are governments responsible for managing what is turning into a crisis for so many communities on the continent and specifically, of course, in Kenya?
Yeah, I see governments are trying to chip in to try and see whether communities can be resilient, can adapt. But sincerely, the efforts that are in place currently are not enough. Are not enough because we just see policies and we don't see these policies being implemented. So we want to see actions even in our local governments, the county governments and the national governments. We want, because what happens mostly here is that we always focus on emergency response. When there is an emergency that is happening, that's when you see people, you see governments coming in to respond. But they are not putting a lot of effort to ensuring that people are adapting, people are becoming resilient, and are able to withstand the effects of climate change.
All right, Charles EKALELE, thank you very much indeed for taking us through the scenario as being experienced by your community in northern Kenya. Now, let's turn our attentions to Western Sahara. MOULOUD SAID is the Polisario Front's representative in Washington, D.C. MOULOUD, welcome. Thank you for talking to Africa Here and Now. I started off by describing the Western Sahara issue as Africa's last colony. There are many people who don't understand the background of Western Sahara. As I said, calling it Africa's last colony, it was, I jotted down a few dates. 1957, Morocco claimed Western Sahara, but Spain, who'd colonized the region, pulled out in 1975, right? Morocco then annexes it, and it is not recognized internationally at all. But bit by bit, over the successive years, more and more countries have been according Morocco the recognition of having sovereignty over Western Sahara. Most recently, Spain in 2022, I think it was, and then just this year, it was France. So if you pick up from there, MOULOUD, so that we can explain why these big countries have seemingly suddenly decided to recognize Morocco's claim to Western Sahara.
Just a small correction. The Moroccans, they supported the right of the people's self-determination in the 60s and 70s at the UN resolution. So they did not claim Western Sahara in 1957. But there are several issues that they made this change. They said that they support the autonomy. But the issue is that no one knows the autonomy plan because Morocco never presented that plan. So you have many countries, they say they will support the autonomy plan presented by Morocco, but no, until today, the plan is not presented nowhere, not at the UN, not to any. Secondly, in the case of Spain in particular, I'm sure you heard about this case of the Pegasus. You know that they had this Pegasus recording on Mr. Sanchez, his wife.
The big scandal, yeah.
So there was that blackmail that has to do with that. And in fact, in the Spanish Parliament, Spanish Congress, from the most left party to the right party, all of them, they came up with a position against the decision taken by Mr. Sanchez, a position that he could not explain. Sometimes they said it's because he wants to stop the flood of immigrants from Morocco, because the Moroccans, they open the gate and they close it whenever they want, and they are using it as a pressure on Morocco. So there is that, and there is the issue of the Pegasus. That's regarding Spain. And he said that he supports the autonomy, but he never read the autonomy plan because it does not exist up to today. There is no real plan.
That's the plan that's been put forward by Morocco, suggesting that Western Sahara has a certain amount of autonomy, but under the sovereignty of Morocco, right?
Well, yeah.
MOULOUD, of course, the other element in this story was the last Donald Trump administration, when the American diplomats went to Morocco and said, we want you to recognize Israel, have reopen formal diplomatic relations. So that seemed to tip things over a bit. And what was quite surprising was that after, and it was done in the final days of the last Trump administration in 2020, and what was surprising was that when Joe Biden came in, although the Democrats were committed to a negotiated settlement in Western Sahara, that is to say, there should be a proper referendum, a free and fair referendum to decide the future of the territory, the Americans suddenly forgot about that, and Biden just essentially rolled over. So you've got this combination of the Americans rolling over, Biden rolling over on the Trump decision, Trump coming back. Then, as Martin says, you've got France and Spain. I'm just wondering what the options are now for the Polisario. I mean, is the only way, I mean, not wishing to be a gloomster, but is the only way that you go back to armed struggle?
Thank you very much for the question. Regarding the decision taken by Trump, as you know, that in February of 22, almost 30 senators, Republicans and Democrats, they wrote a letter to the new president, then Biden, asking him to cancel the decision taken by Trump, which what the administration decided to do is just to freeze it, leave it as it, but still working with the United Nations.
Yeah.
So they took that position, which they did not give up on the right of the people of Western Sahara which we believe that's a big success from where we're coming. France, it has its own reason. It has been from day one supporting Morocco, as I said, politically, economically, militarily. They are the one who are behind the autonomy plan, an autonomy plan that no one knows what's about. And we are not against the autonomy plan, but it has to be among the choices that the people of Western Sahara should choose among: independence, integration, and autonomy. So that this is the democratic solution, but it seems that the French and the French are afraid of having a free election, a free referendum in the Western Sahara. So that's and we are going to continue, of course, with our struggle. This is not going to the end of the Sahrawi struggle. I mean, not even remotely to think about it. I mean, we're going to continue, and whether the U.S. position or the French or the Spanish becomes more clear than the one before, we're going to keep on fighting for our right, because that's something that we're committed to, and we're ready to do to go to the
When you
final
say fighting for your
on
rights,
this.
fighting for your rights, is that just a diplomatic term, or do you actually physically mean fighting with Morocco on this? Because I've noticed that Algeria has really ramped up its military spending recently. So has Morocco. And a lot of people fear that there could be some sort of explosion of conflict in the area.
Because of the conflicts going on in the Middle East, Ukraine, and so on, nobody looks at any other conflict right now. And so we're going to continue using all means possible and all the legal means to continue our struggle, including the military choice.
Perhaps, Maulud, you could just briefly, for those who don't know much about it, tell us what's in it for Morocco. Why is Morocco so obsessed with Western Sahara?
This is, as for anybody who knows the area, Morocco became independent in 1956, and when Mauritania became independent in 1960. When Mauritania became independent in 1960, Morocco refused to recognize Mauritania. They said that it belongs to Morocco because the Moroccan border goes to the river of Senegal, and it comprises even Timbuktu. That was the official map of Morocco. When Algeria became independent in 1962, Morocco invaded Algeria because they wanted to take part of Algeria, all the western part of Algeria. So this expansionist policy has been the tradition and the basis of the Moroccan policy, the expansion that in fact, Mauritania became independent in 1960, and Morocco recognized them 9 years later, 1969.
Is this expansionism for the sake of expansionism, or is there a point to it beyond ego and, jingoism? Do you see, people, why is Morocco, which is a very successful, attractive country in its own right, so obsessed with Western Sahara? Is it just so they can have as much land as possible, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, there are different reasons for it. One of them is that they dream about their big empires. And the other one in the Western Sahara is their appetite for the phosphate and the resources in the Western Sahara. As you know, Western Sahara is one of the biggest reserve in phosphate and open sky mine, plus the fishing, which right now I'm sure you heard about the European Court of Justice that denied any European country to sign an agreement with Morocco on Western Saharan resources. So there is the issue of the appetite they had for the mineral.
So there's a substantial economic benefit.
Yeah, and secondly, just a few years before, there was several coup attempts against the king by the army. And that's a way also of getting rid of the army and keeping them busy in Western Sahara.
All right. Now, Maulud, currently, the Polisario Front has, should we say, control of only about 20% of the territory. The population who remain there are living quite basic, should we say, quite impoverished lives. They're living on humanitarian aid. They're living in tented camps. And are you saying that all you would really need is a fair referendum of these people so that they can determine how they want to proceed in their country? Or are you being maximalist and saying it's independence, self-determination, or nothing?
It has never been our position since the day we embarked in the UN process in 1991, and we accepted the UN African Union proposal, which calls for a referendum with two options. One of them is the full integration to Morocco, and the other one is the independence of Western Sahara. And of course, we sign that we agree on whatever decision is taken in a free and fair referendum by the people of Western Sahara. So what we have to do is to accept whatever the people want. If they want to be part of Morocco, we'll accept it. If they want to be independent, Morocco has to accept it. That has to be in a free and fair referendum.
But it's not happening, is it? This referendum is not happening.
It's not happening for a simple reason. I think even Mr. James Baker made it very clear at the end of his term. You know, he came up with his plan, which was signed by Morocco and Polisario in Houston. A few days later, when the Moroccan delegation went back to Morocco, they changed their mind. They said they are not part of it. And like Mr. Baker said, the Moroccans will never have the recognition of their sovereignty of Western Sahara unless they have a free and fair referendum where the people can choose their destiny.
In your opinion, are the majority of Sahrawis pro-independence, or do you have the people who would rather be part of something larger and more prestigious?
If we follow the logic, if the Moroccans knew that they have the majority, they would have accepted the referendum a long time ago. You know, if the Moroccans, they knew they can win, they would have accepted the Baker plan.
Good point. Very good point.
The Baker plan, which called for the referendum, they could have accepted it. And we accepted it with no reservation.
Because you were confident that you would win.
Yes, and that's we know. And the Moroccans are confident they are going to lose. That's why they refuse to have to speak about. And the problem is that it's a matter also of culture in Morocco. I mean, I'm not speaking about Sweden or the UK or something. This is a regime where free elections and freedom of expression and democracy, the way it's understood in the West, is not the one they have in Morocco. So for them to have a free election, free referendum organized by the class organization is something that out of this world.
Do you think the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, should he be doing more to rescue the Baker Plan and to put it back on the agenda? He hasn't really made many moves on this.
Yeah, I think the first responsibility is on the Security Council. They are the one who have the first responsibility. And while you have countries like France that from day one have been, even before this latest development, they have been committed to Morocco, even preventing the United Nations mission in Western Sahara to have human rights mandate. The French, they are the one who oppose it. So that's the minimum that could be done in a UN operation. So imagine to have the French accept what Morocco refuses. It's like having Morocco in the Security Council with a veto. That's why this process really did not go through. It's because of the French responsibility in this. They are the one who were responsible for the failure of Mr. Baker, the Security Council, and also for all the fact that we don't have the referendum today and we don't have a UN mandate for the human rights in the occupied territory and also in the refugee camps. Because when we ask for the MINURSO, the UN mission mandate for human rights, it's not just in the occupied territory, but also in the refugee camps, so that we can expose the Moroccan lies about the situation in the camps. So we accept the human rights monitoring in the camps also, not just in the occupied territory.
Moulud, and finally, I think everyone will accept that the international landscape has changed quite dramatically. There's a lot of uncertainty now on the horizon with a new Trump presidency, perhaps disengaging from the international community. What does the near future look like for the Polisario Front and the fight for self-determination for Western Sahara?
For the last almost 50 years that we have been fighting, the world, the landscape in the world have changed so many times. And yet we did not change. We kept the same commitment, the same determination, and whatever is landscape in the future, nothing is going to be changing in us. So we're going to keep on our struggle until we reach our goal, whatever are the circumstances internationally or regionally.
MOULOUD SAID, thank you very much for talking to us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. And it's a real pleasure seeing you after so long. Thank you.
Right. Let's go to DONU. What's been on your mind then of late as you've been touring around Europe?
Well, lots of different things have popped into my head. For example, I went to Venice to see the Biennale, which is a sort of huge art and culture exhibition that comes up every 2 years. And as I approached Venice, we landed on the mainland of Italy, and then we took a boat to Venice. And the thing that struck me was it was so like the Niger Delta, where I come from in Nigeria. It was just like basically it was a very familiar type of terrain, and yet they've done so much better with, coming from a riverine area than we have. So that struck me. Another thing that's been on my mind is Kemi Badenoch, the now very famous Nigerian girl, should I say Nigerian-British girl, who is leader of the British Conservative Party. And she's been generating a lot of controversy within Nigerian circles, both here and in Nigeria, where I'm coming from, and here where I am now. And what people are saying is, they're very angry with her because she's not identifying with Nigeria. And in fact, a Nigerian government official who is in charge of the Diaspora Commission complained that she reached out to Kemi and Kemi blanked her, ghosted her. And so a lot of people are saying, well, a few people are saying, well, why shouldn't she? Nigeria has nothing to offer her or most of us. But I would say the majority are angry that Kemi is not being patriotic. And they say that she's made very disparaging comments about the country. She's talked about fleeing from Nigeria and being rescued by the United Kingdom. So people are very angry with her about that. And that's, a constant topic of gossip or gist, as we put it, in Nigerian circles.
But isn't it her choice? I mean, surely she's allowed complete free choice as to whom she relates to and whether she relates or not to the place where she grew up. She was born in the UK, right?
Well, she was born in the UK, but I think she went back to Nigeria as a child and didn't come back here again until she was in her 16 or 17, her late teens. And so the thing with Nigeria is you are trained as a Nigerian child to always regard yourself as Nigerian, no matter what passport you hold. Okay? So in that sense, Nigerians kind of think like expatriates rather than immigrants. I know I certainly do. I mean, I spent most of my life in the UK. But I think like an expatriate. I don't think like an immigrant. So that's what people want of Kemi. But you know what? I don't blame her. Like you said, it's her choice. And Nigeria has been such a disappointment to so many people over the years. It's cyclical. And we're at one of those high points of national disenchantment and disillusionment. And I think the time when Kemi left Nigeria was one of those times when things were not going well for the majority of Nigerians, including middle-class Nigerians like herself. I mean, look, her father was a doctor. Her mother's a university professor. She's not exactly from the lowest rung of the ladder socially. However, Nigeria has a way of crushing the spirits and financial well-being of people who in other countries would be affluent and comfortable and would have basic amenities. So when people say, oh, her mother was a professor, her father was a doctor, how dare she talk as if she was suffering? Well, it's entirely possible to suffer if you're a professional or the child of professionals in Nigeria. I mean, the absence of electricity, you have to be really quite rich to live well in Nigeria.
So, what advice would you give to her?
What advice would I give to her? Well, what I'd say to her is, look, some of the things she says are totally, totally stupid. Like her claim, I mean, I think I've said this before, her claim that Britain's wealth was not in any way significantly impacted by slavery or colonialism. I mean, it's not just stupid, it's a lie, okay? Then again, she does say some things that are sensible. So my advice to her is, you know what? No matter how upset you are about the way Nigeria treated you or your family, and no matter how relieved you were when you eventually wound up in London, try and remember that, you do come from somewhere and that one day you may be happy, you and your children may be happy to have an alternative home, somewhere else in the world that you can count as your own. And so shut up, stop saying silly things, but, keep up the good work.
All right, I wonder if she'll accept that. And what about you, Patrick? What have you been up to?
Well, I've been running around Europe a bit. I was in Brussels. There was a big Africa-EU meeting, funnily enough, on November the 6th, which you may recall was the morning at which the world learned that Donald J. Trump had won a second term or wouldn't come back to. And it was really remarkable looking at the European bureaucrats looking hollow-eyed like rabbits in the headlights, trying to respond to something that was really going to turn their world upside down. And so we got into some quite heated discussions about this. And actually, Donald Kabruka, the former president of the African Development Bank, made a very good point, saying, well, Europe's just got to get its act together. And so has Africa, by the way. And if they want to reform the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, all these institutions, they want to have their seat on the G20, they're not going to have to ask for permission from America. They should just go and do it.
So what do you do for fun? What do you do for fun in all this, Patrick? I'm just wondering. Are you always on the job, as it were?
On the job? No, I do go out and go and hit some jazz clubs, which was the other thing I wanted to talk about. Because we're in the middle. I'm back in London. And we're in the middle of the London Jazz Festival. And I just would like everyone to find, if you're in London, just look at the agenda for the festival on the internet, and you'll find a range of music all over London.
Yeah.
And it's a particular gig I really would suggest you go to, and it's on Wednesday. And it's Tony Coffey, who, as the name implies, comes from Ghana, and a Ukrainian harpist called Alina Bezis-Hanska. And they've actually made a few albums together. Tony Coffey is sort of renowned saxophonist, is like in the sort of tradition of John Coltrane, really powerful, stonking saxophone sound. But paired with this Ukrainian harpist is really something quite ethereal.
It sounds really interesting. A Ukrainian harpist and a Ghanaian saxophonist. What more could you ask? Thank you for that, Patrick. And that ends this edition of Africa Here and Now. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. We're available on the major audio platforms, and there's our website, AfricaHere&NOW.com, where you can catch up on all the past episodes. I'm on LinkedIn and on X at Martine Dennis. Get in touch. We recorded this on November the 18th, 2024. Our producer is Anne Busby. Our original music is by Enric Adam. Simon Elliott and Charlie Panton put it all together. Our thanks to our guests, Charles and MOULOUD. From DONU, Patrick and me, thank you for your company.